Yeah, I mean, we're providing holistic financial planning, and investments is one piece of that. But there's a tax aspect to, every sort of, whether it's the life events or throughout the year. So it's a super busy time for most people. They're frantically trying to file their taxes, and oftentimes people like myself, are asked, okay, well, how can I lower my taxes? And the answer is you can't really do much right now.
Right, you're a little late.
Yeah, tax planning is really a year-round sport, and so whether we're discussing ideas this summer for the following tax season, or running scenario plans in the fall before implementing, it's really a year-round issue.
I want to share something. You were on a podcast recently, Getting Results with Dr. Gene, where you were asked a great question, which is, when should someone consider coming to someone like you? And here is what you said in that podcast. And on the other side of this, I'm going to let Kevin pick it up. So let's roll that soundbite.
It behooves business owners to find the right person that can give them that objective advice. And I think, there's a tendency oftentimes, in a lot of businesses, right, where, to hammer everything's a nail, right? And so, oftentimes some advisors, like their goal is like, hey, I want to manage the 401k, or, I want to sell you some life insurance for your buy-sell agreements. And, that's just not good, objective, comprehensive planning, right? You just kind of have to look at everything.
Kevin, take it away, because you got to look at everything.
Absolutely. David, I'd like to ask you two questions as an expert in this field as it relates to financial planning and the impact that taxes can have on a financial plan. First, for your investors that are in a higher tax bracket, are looking for a consistent stream of income in their retirement to help offset the loss of income from their working days, but don't necessarily want to pay a lot of taxes, are municipal bonds a good way to approach that type of investor? And two, tax loss harvesting, which I think a lot of financial advisors don't speak often enough about. Ways to minimize your tax burden without actually leaving the stock market altogether by employing tax harvesting techniques. So would you mind touching upon municipal bonds and tax loss harvesting?
I'll jump into tax loss harvesting first, because I think this is a concept that many people understand, right? And often most investors are, looking at this towards the end of the year, where you can take a loss in investment, stay out for 31 days, go back into it so you avoid the wash sale rules, and then apply that loss to a capital gain, and potentially even apply up to $3,000 of income, and then any sort of excess gets rolled over to the following year. But what I do think people should take advantage of is, think about doing their tax loss harvesting throughout the year.
That's right.
So every time there's a pullback, and with so many people in index funds nowadays, that there's opportunities to say, hey, instead of sitting it out, for 31 days and repurchasing it, well, maybe you take the tax loss right away, you buy something very similar in the index world, and then you ride the upside from there. And then you just build those capital loss. Because even if you own your own home and you're going to qualify for the $500,000 homeowner exclusion, or, there's eventually you're going to need these tax losses. So I think that people at the very least should almost have a $3,000 deduction for the rest of their life, right?
Right.
And so, Wall Street's always very creative, right? Because now there's strategies where you can kind of recreate the index funds with a basket of 200 or 300 stocks. And so through algorithm trading, they can tax loss harvest that every minute of the day, step out of Pepsi, go into Coke, go back into it 31 days. And so there's a little limited tracking error in that index. And so this is a great strategy, particularly, if a business owner is going to sell their business in, 3 to 7 years, maybe outside of their business in their liquid portfolio, they should be taking those losses and building them up in anticipation of that sell.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and munis, I'm a little biased. Right out of college, I spent 8 years as a muni banker, and so for the right person, munis are great, right? Because I think that, and it's kind of interesting because the municipal market is very technical, right? Because the principal payments are largely January, July, or December, June, and so when cash comes in and all of a sudden it needs to get redeployed, and you're going to bid up those bond prices, and so that's when you don't really want to buy them. But when you do want to buy them, is when people are liquidating their bond portfolios around tax time. And so there's some sales typically around this time of year. But we have to also remember that it's going to be very efficient at the short end of the curve. So if you're buying very short munis, it's just going to be 1 minus the highest tax rate, and that's kind of the yield you're going to get. Whereas you can get greater after-tax yields if you go further out up the curve, but then at the same time, you're taking more tax risk at that time. Right?
Let me ask you, David, real quick. I just want to remind, because we have growing viewers on X, that they can ask questions. You can put your question for David or for Kevin or for our other guests into the Twitter feed, and then we will make sure that we ask David Wilson your question. I want to pick up a follow-up on the Muni question, because I don't have the kind of skill that the two of you have. I wish I could tax harvest, because hypothetically, let's say you knew a TV guy who left the media business and put 50 grand into a startup, and then that went belly up when it got sold to another company.
Are you sure that's hypothetical, Adam?
I turned 50 into 9 grand. I know how to make some money there for someone else. But here's my question to you about munis. I covered Puerto Rico back in 2016, 15, when there was real potential for default on muni bonds. And it wasn't just Puerto Rico. There were states where their muni bonds were going to be in trouble. And I'm wondering, David, the tax advantage might be there, but are they still a safe investment, especially in the current economic situation? Because I don't think the federal government's going to bail out any state whose munis or municipality, like Dallas had an issue with muni bonds. I don't think anyone's going to step in to save them.
Credit matters, right? And so I think that, as people are diversified, or you can either be very diversified or you do very diligent credit work, right? And so in general, where are your risks, right? Yes, you have a lot of risk in the most levered island in the world, Puerto Rico, potentially on the hospital side, just sort of speak generally. And I think if people kind of look at, okay, well, maybe I look at the different sectors and what the default rates are in the different sectors. Higher education, for example, has historically at least a low default rate. If that free equity comes on the balance sheet, as you issue bonds for, you can buy bonds for, Duke University or MIT or whatever the school is.
Sure.
And so, credit matters. Even for people, clients that we have are in New York State and New York City, we're going to be buying bonds outside of those locations because, just to diversify and buy bonds in sort of in communities and states with surging demographics, and so that way we're protected a little bit there.
David, just want to remind everybody too that we've got Bob Elliott standing by. He's going to join us momentarily after the break. But real quick, when your clients come to you talking about tax strategies, you mentioned this when you first started talking with us about you should have a different tax strategy at different points in your life. So let's address people who might still have kids at home who haven't gone yet to college. How would you advise that person, whether they're an entrepreneur, whether they're a business owner? How does that strategy differ than someone like me who's looking towards, exiting the work world in the next 5 to 10 years?
So there's a host of strategies depending on what it is, right? So I think if there's investments in real estate, there's strategies to sort of purchase, manage, and sell real estate, whether it's 1031s or cost segregation. Entrepreneurs, of course, many of them are running more than their share of personal expenses, for example, through a business. So that finding what's ordinary and necessary and running that through to lower their tax rate is super important. For parents here in New York, for example, you can do a $10,000 contribution to a 529, and that's state deductible. There's different strategies when it comes to if people are kind of having kids, hiring them in the businesses, whether that's for modeling on the website, funding those Roth IRAs, all sorts of different strategies depending on what their situation is. It has to do with talk to your advisors, your CPA, your financial planner, and kind of think about, okay, well, what's most appropriate for you in each situation. So.